I'd like to introduce our first presenter, Mr. Jeff Brown, who has been recently promoted to Head of Commercial Solutions at Equifax Canada. Congratulations, Jeff. It's good to see you.
Thanks, Brenda.
Hi. Jeff has been a driving force for commercial and small business credit at Equifax Canada since January of 2016, where he led innovation and strategy to help transform how credit is understood and leveraged within the Canadian marketplace. Jeff is going to kick off Stronger Together by sharing the current state of credit and the view of the financial status for a small business across Canada. Jeff, welcome, and thank you for sharing your insights with us today.
Brenda, thank you so much. So good afternoon, everyone here in Eastern Canada, and good morning to those joining us from the West Coast. It's an honor to join you here today to provide an overview of the state of small business. So as Brenda said, I'm Head of Commercial Solutions at Equifax Canada, and I'm genuinely excited about this conference here today. So small businesses across all industries have been heavily impacted throughout the pandemic, and the federal programs that acted as a lifeline for them have really been phased out or pivoted here recently. So we've seen throughout this past month as well is that a lot of the mask mandates or restrictions are really starting to be lifted. So this is surely a sign for optimism looking forward. Really what we're trying to get to the bottom of here is what are the key economic factors that we need to be aware of as we all collectively look to try to help small business hit that exponential growth and recreate a strong economy here. So I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen. All right, so a key item that we really need to mention is that GDP has yet to reach the pre-pandemic levels, but inflation has really started to rise here dramatically. Prior to the pandemic, we saw consumer price index move in perfect harmony with the GDP. And what has really ended up happening is that this pent-up consumer demand from the pandemic, coupled with the strong housing market, has contributed to a rise in inflation. That spike in consumer price index really took off at the beginning of last year and has showed no sign of slowing down. When we compare the overall consumer price index, excluding energy, we see that energy is playing a more and more important role in driving that consumer price. From a high-level view, as indicated on the chart on the right, pricing in gasoline, transportation, food, and real estate, all of which are essential needs, have gone up the most over the past 2 years. A 30% year-over-year increase, which was recorded even before the Ukraine and Russia conflict, and that number really shows no sign of coming down anytime soon. That being said, as a consumer, these numbers are pretty scary. The amount of burden these price increases have on a household budget could be downright crippling if these trends continue. When we talk about increased prices, it's important to know that this isn't all doom and gloom. Those are signs of hope in key factors in key sectors. In this chart on the left, what we're looking at is the sales dollars by industry indexed prior to the pandemic. So with this, we see an obvious drop in dollars spent during the initial waves of the pandemic, with restaurants and service establishments taking a large dip. However, when you look ahead to Q2 and Q3 of last year, what we see is there was a resurgence to near pre-pandemic levels in dollars spent. So this was likely due to a pent-up consumer demands, but then as new restrictions were introduced in Q4 in the late part of last year, as we saw the new variant, this took another full hit on full service and limited service eating places. So when we look at the chart on the right, we've seen a dramatic increase in the number of job vacancies, coupled with a jump in hourly wage that was offered as well. So with the easing of restrictions happening here across the country here in April, my personal speculation is that we'll see a decrease in both of these variables here shortly. So the theme of the current state of small business and commercial credit is a balance between debt and delinquency. So during the course of the pandemic, the federal government has injected billions of dollars directly into small businesses through grants, subsidies, and loans. And on the loans front, the Canadian Emergency Business Account, or CEBA, that alone accounted for almost $49 billion worth of loans to almost 900,000 businesses. So when these funds hit the hands of small business owners, for the most part, the money was used wisely. I mean, paying off or down highly utilized accounts or past due and delinquent accounts. When this happened, it also created this artificial improvement to those businesses' credit ratings, essentially meaning to credit managers across the country that these businesses look like A1 premium customers. So when in actuality, they might not have been. These same businesses have then used that strong credit rating to slowly increase their debts over the past year by over 20%, or on average about $35,000. So this isn't necessarily a bad thing. As I've mentioned before, businesses need to be spending money in order to be making money. So if we quickly look across over to the right on delinquencies, again, it's all about a healthy balance between rising debt and lowering delinquencies. Year over year, 30+ day delinquencies have decreased about 10%, with the slowdown on the progression over the past quarter. So while the current outlook looks positive, it's extremely important to understand what pre-pandemic or business as usual delinquency rates are in Canada. In a healthy transacting economy that was showing kind of growth in 2019, 30+ day delinquencies are typically usually above about 10%. So that means at any given time, on average, about 10% of businesses in Canada have an account that is at least 30 days past due. It's just kind of the nature of how Canadian businesses operate. So as these restrictions continue to ease and the government funding evaporates, those delinquency rates are going to shoot right back up, which could even arguably be higher than they were before. So we compound like a higher debt burden with an anticipated increase in delinquency rates. It means that it's not if, but when small businesses go delinquent here soon, that hole that they have to dig themselves out of will be quite difficult and actually larger than it was prior to the pandemic. So if you compound that on top of the expectation of these CEBA loan repayments in 2023, and it becomes clear that as a collective, all of us here really need to ensure that we instill a healthy dose of credit education in our businesses and the interactions we have with small businesses. So another warning signal that we're starting to see is a catch up on the negative occurrence credit life cycle. So businesses typically go from delinquencies to collections, legal, and then to bankruptcies. During the pandemic, delinquencies were reduced by federal support and lenders offering deferrals. Collection companies paused throughout 2020 and 2021 doing outbound calls. Court proceedings were delayed and rescheduled due to capacity issues. And each one of these phases also meant that there was fewer businesses that could make their way to that final stage of bankruptcy. So when we look at insolvency rates, while year over year it held fairly steady, when we cast our eyes on the quarter over quarter change, the alarm bells are kind of starting to sound off. We saw a 36% increase in small businesses insolvencies, which tells us that there's that backlog of negative occurrences is really starting to clear up. And really a surge is about to kind of make its way through. When we look through at inquiries, so when a business is actually going through and pursuing credit, whether at a supplier or at a bank, we've seen a steady decrease in businesses requesting this. So, and this is based on just what we went through in debt levels. This should really be viewed as a positive thing, oddly enough. It means that the pandemic, as it starts to kind of wrap up here, small businesses feel that they're saturated with the amount of debt that they've taken on. So the chart on the right really shows that we're still dramatically off from inquiry levels compared to pre-pandemic. In fact, only Alberta and Ontario are currently showing any signs of growth in comparison to last year. In Alberta, those increases are likely due to lenders and credit managers reevaluating high-risk accounts. And in Ontario, this is due to the fact that restrictions were far deeper than other provinces in 2020 and some lightened in 2021, which provided a little bit of relief. So on to new businesses. So kind of continuing on that positive note, when we continue to see healthy recovery in newly established businesses. For reference, in the past 3 months of each year, that historically when we see the lowest level of new businesses opening up. So when we saw that year over year that there was a 62% growth in 2021, all signs are really pointing to a potentially historic level of new business growth this summer. So from a marketing perspective, this really needs to be kept in mind as all data that we've reviewed thus far shown us that new businesses are we're financially success will really be gained for suppliers, lenders, and any small business supporters here in 2022. So from a province to province viewpoint, Quebec continues to outperform all other provinces with newly established businesses. There's been about 114% increase in new businesses. So again, really positive things happening in the economy that doesn't always get highlighted. And lastly here, as I mentioned off the top, delinquencies are at all-time lows and have really reached the bottom plateau that we'll expect to see rising here in 2020. For 30+ day delinquencies, there'll be a rush back up to kind of that 10 to 11% range here over the next 6 months. So something that we all really need to be collectively mindful of is that not everybody's going to succeed. And we need to be really diligent about where we invest our time, our energy, and our capital. So as businesses edge back up to normal levels of transactions, we anticipate the 60+ and 90+ day delinquencies to hold to current levels and resemble closely to what they remained at for 2021. So the one thing I really want to stress here is that you can put your money on it. Delinquency rates will not go any lower than they currently are. And now it's just a matter of time of monitoring how closely and how fast they're going to rise. So while it's not all necessarily doom and gloom, there's what you're going to hear from a lot of speakers at the rest of the conference here is there's plenty of opportunities and new technologies and things that have really come out here in the economy. While we've gone through it's this really challenging time throughout the pandemic, there's signs of life throughout different parts of the economy, and you're going to hear from experts here throughout the rest of the conference on really what you need to be able to be focusing on, and really how we can help the collective small business economy really get out of the hole that we dug ourselves in. Brenda, have any kind of questions or comments?
That's really, to me, there's some surprising information on your statistics and your charts, especially the new business growth you're seeing is surpassed pre-pandemic this quarter. That's wonderful to hear, because, unfortunately, we hear a lot of doom and gloom. So this is really quite a positive report.
Yeah, it's as we look at the numbers, it kind of shocked us as well, because again, like you open up the news and it's always, our local restaurant has gone out after 40 years of being in business, and it's unfortunately we live in a bit of a highlight reel society, and it's always kind of the big shocking news that gravitates.
Yeah.
But there is a resurgence happening with small businesses, and all these entrepreneurs that have seen opportunities through the pandemic, they're really starting to come to light now.
Well, this is a perfect time for a discussion like today, for people listening and who are looking for information on growing their small business. So we do have a question for you. What do you see as the most pressing issue or issues facing small businesses right now?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I mean, there's so many pressing issues that they are dealing with, whether it's really kind of finding great employment. It really depends on the industry. So when we look at construction, they were really growing really fast and really didn't see any decline during the pandemic. But if you're in the food services space where it's really hard to find staff, I mean, that's really going to be a challenging issue here as well. So staffing issues, this burden of incoming delinquency that is going to come up, and being able to just manage their finances moving forward. I mean, we're taking on an incredible amount of debt, and we can't just go back to acting the same way we were before. So that's going to be a challenge on itself, is getting back to bringing customers in your store or through your online e-commerce site, while also trying to keep in mind all the debt that we took on, all the risks that we took on during the pandemic, because it doesn't shift over in one day. It's going to be a bit of a road to recovery, and it's just being able to be on top of things before they come in. So
where do you see we'll be in about a year from now? What do you think?
Oh, I mean, I wish I had a crystal ball, right?
Yeah.
Would have seen this pandemic coming, but yeah, it's. I think the federal government has made a really good play at being able to support but not bail out small businesses, and they've made a really clear sign that there are no bailouts as part of this. So they're going to see a lot of monitoring that does come out from, if we happen to go through a few more waves, that they're ready to be able to react. So really hoping that we do see a bit of an education with small businesses about being able to kind of climb out of this debt. And again, there's some great technologies and some of the preconceived notions about how lenders used to interact with small businesses, not taking those for granted. So there's a lot of really great players that have come out in this market. You're going to hear of some of them today that will be able to challenge the norm. So I'm hoping that we collectively kind of, as small businesses, understand that we're not going back to normal. It's actually kind of a good thing, is we get to challenge preconceived notions and use it as a catalyst for change. So that's my hope over the next year, is that we learn from things that we didn't like before, and that we leverage some of this new technology, these new capabilities, and the new opportunities that small businesses clearly are seeing in the market right now.
The debt creep has been pretty frightening for a lot of small businesses. And what advice can you give them?
It's just staying on top of it, right? I mean, tomorrow seems like it's far away, especially with, again, some of these heavy debt burdens. The average business is taking on anywhere between $40,000 and $60,000 of these CEBA loans. It's not free, and it's just being able to plan for it now, because if you can put in small amounts now, it's going to become less of an issue of if you're waiting 3 or 4 months before it becomes due. So it's planning ahead, thinking ahead, and again, as a small business owner, it's got to be very challenging, just trying to get people back into your store and buying your products and services, and easier said than done. So it just requires some diligent planning.
We see all levels of government really talking a lot about supporting small business in Canada and the importance of small business, but I honestly wonder if it's a lot of talk. because some of the money seems to be held up, or it seems to disappear. They make big announcements and then it seems to disappear. And is this something that you're hearing from small business leaders?
I wouldn't say so. I mean, maybe at the initial, as we were all, there was this collective fear about what was going on with the pandemic, but I think it's helping make them more accountable. I mean, you'll hear from Marcy Birchfield about the Toronto Region Board of Trade. If anything, it's given them the visibility to create things like dashboards and understand where the funds are going and understanding who's benefiting from it. There's a collective accountability that's happened that's been really reassuring at a city, municipal, province, and at a federal level. So again, sometimes those negative news stories can perpetuate, but there's been a lot of great programs that have come out of learning what's going on. And I think it's helped us get a healthy respect for how critical small businesses are in our economy. So again, a lot of tracking, a lot of due diligence, and a lot of accountability happening. So it's kind of great to hear.
And what's your best advice to someone listening today and they've got a great idea and they want to start up? What should they do first?
I'm going to go back to, the stronger together. And I really like the theme of this mini conference here is that you can't do this yourself. If anything that we've learned is that it's family, friends, and your peers, it's really understanding how you can work together, because not everybody knows what's going on. You can't predict the future. And small businesses are really resilient and full of passion, but even small business owners and entrepreneurs need that support of being reinvigorated. And so again, it's understand who you rely on, who you admire, and build that close network here. And the theme of eQuo and everybody around it, I think it really resonates because it's the support system you need to be able to kind of get things across the board. So understand and listen to here everybody who's at the conference, and don't be afraid to reach out, ask questions, and look for solutions. Keep that entrepreneurial spirit alive.
That's wonderful advice. And I truly agree with you. A lot of people who are sitting in their businesses right now and wondering what the next steps are, you've given them some really good, strong, positive words of wisdom. And I think we just need to hear that now, because we've heard so much doom and gloom. And I'm pretty excited about the future after listening to what you're telling us, Jeff. This is good. It's good news. Some good things happening.
Great. Well, thank you very much for having me on, Brenda. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jeff. We really appreciate your time.